Welcome back to The Decision 2024, brought to you by Valuetainment and VT Analytics. This is where we bring you the news and the numbers going into the very important U.S. presidential election. I'm Tom Ellsworth, the Biz Doc.
I'm Amy Dangerfield. Let's go ahead and dive into our top story this week, brought to you by Vtnews.ai. This is an amazing news source backed by a powerful artificial intelligence engine created by Valuetainment. It's our top source when it comes to the news, and it should be yours too. So rolling into that top story, Trump returns to the scene 3 months from where he was nearly assassinated in Butler, Pennsylvania. Now, this marks an extremely historic rally. J.D. Vance was there. Elon Musk was there representing Dark MAGA. He gave a very, very powerful speech opening up the event. And of course, Trump, with his usual flair, opens up the speech by signaling to the graphic from 3 months ago when he was nearly assassinated and stating, "As I was saying." It was an absolutely historic rally, galvanized even more support behind him. And of course, we're going to have to wait to see, how this impacts the polls. But speaking of the polls, let's go ahead and roll into the national polls brought to you by Rasmussen Reports. Now, we can see here that as of the 3rd of October, Trump is actually up ahead by 7 points. Now, this is the highest lead that Trump has taken since July 23rd. This was, of course, before Kamala became the presumptive candidate for the Democratic Party. Back then, it was Biden. And so this is really signaling and marking Trump taking a significant lead. When we take a look at Kamala's result, she's been fluctuating between 45 to 50. So her results have been mostly stagnant, whereas we can see Trump has remained on the incline, maybe having a couple of setbacks here and there, but for the most part, he is on a strong upwards trajectory nationally.
The states that matter are the battleground states, and let's look at 3 that will matter very much. Last week we talked about Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, that if those go Trump, it'll be a very early night if they're called. So let's take a look at what the polls are saying in those key states. We have pulled a sample of polls that have come out, and if you take a look at Atlas Intel, September 20th to 25, 1,775 likely voters. That's a very large sample size, and it's showing +3. But if you look here, 2 of them are +1, Harris, and you have +3, +2. Our numbers that we're pulling together are showing 3.5 for Trump in Pennsylvania right now. And we find a lot of enthusiasm that is somewhat repressed. We're asking questions and getting enthusiasm results, such as what you saw in Butler, Pennsylvania, the size of the crowd, and also looking at the areas, looking at yard signs, looking at things. There is a lot of enthusiasm, but there's also a lot of voters that are concentrated in Philadelphia, which runs dark blue. Nonetheless, that's what Pennsylvania is looking like, and the rally is coming at a time where that 3 points that we see is moving toward 3.5, and who knows where it's going to go. There's 30 days to go and a lot could happen, but Pennsylvania is looking increasingly like it's headed for Trump. So now let's go south to storm-ravaged North Carolina. And first, before you're talking about election, if you have the opportunity to do so and to contribute and to help with relief to North Carolina and North Georgia, where the people have been absolutely inundated with floods and water, and now the recovery is in order, please move your heart away from political arguments and move it toward the people of North Carolina and do what you can through reputable national organizations. As we look at the polls here in North Carolina, Washington Post ran a poll, very interesting, the left-leaning Washington Post, with 1,000 registered voters, not likely voters, and they came up +3 Trump, and you look at the date, 25th to 29th. Insider Advantage and Quinnipiac that had a very low ranking in terms of their accuracy in the 2020 polls, is showing +1. If there's any left lean in this Quinnipiac poll, that's probably Trump 3. North Carolina looks similar. However, will those voters in the storm-ravaged areas be able to vote? There was a lot of requests for mail-in ballots. Did they receive them? Can they get them back? So in a world where 20,000 votes can make a difference in the rural areas that might not be able to vote, that could spell trouble. Right now, all things held constant, North Carolina, we have at 2 for Trump and gently rising week over week. Let's step back and take a quick look at some of the stories. We pulled these from X and Vtnews.ai. Over the weekend, Kamala Harris's team, or herself, were tweeting about Lebanon at the very moment that the nation was looking to FEMA and asking questions about was FEMA being effective getting relief supplies into North Carolina and North Georgia. Nonetheless, the headlines came out and it wasn't what the campaign wanted to see. So not particularly good coverage and not particularly good leadership in the eyes of many, including the typically liberal press. So now we go a little bit further south to Georgia, and +5 from Quinnipiac from the 25th to the 29th with 942 likely voters. We then go insider advantage over a slightly narrower margin with 800 likely voters, and it was showing at a tie. But if you take a look at this, it's a tie or one for Harris, with the other polls coming through showing Trump not just 1 point, but these are decisive leads, especially when you consider that BSG and YouGov definitely have shown to have a slight left lean in their polling. So if that's the case, that means Georgia is looking increasingly like a Trump state. Again, we're 4 weeks from the election and a lot can happen.
So now we take a look at the path to 270. And as we have just shown you, Trump is showing a very strong lead in many of these states that are needed for Kamala Harris. So with Trump, we can see that his clearest path to 270 is, of course, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. As we just showed you, he has galvanized a lot of support in those areas. He is up in the polls. And just with those 3 states alone, he is securing what he needs, 270 electoral votes in order to win the presidency. Now, when it comes to Harris, really her only path to 270 involves Wisconsin, which we see as a toss-up right now. It could be leaning a little bit Harris, but we see it nearly as a deadlock. Then we have Michigan, which of course is leaning Harris, so she has that in her favor. But Arizona, that seems to be Republican territory, at least right now. We're going to be watching this state carefully as we progress closer towards the election. So with 268 total, she needs to win all of these plus one of these other states over here, or sacrifice maybe Arizona for one of the states here that have more electoral votes in total to get her over the line to 270. All in all, it's really not looking good for the Harris ticket right now.
However, a lot of things could happen in the next 4 weeks, and they usually do. But right now, the math seems to favor Trump. Win these 3, along with the locks and near locks that are red, Texas, the Midwest, etc., while Harris has got to win the blues, California, New York, which she is going to do, and then have a mixture here along with a win back. So there's more work to do for Harris than Trump. Statistically speaking, that's what it looks like.
And so now it's time for our Valuetainment Call. This is the culmination of all of the data we just showed you, plus our own aggregate to bring you our call just 4 weeks from the election. So with a month to go, Tom, what are we seeing?
We are not materially changed from last week, although we're concerned about voters being suppressed by weather and displacement in their own towns. And so North Carolina and Georgia, we still see as leaning Trump. As Pennsylvania, with those 3, it would be 270, exactly what's needed to win. And our probability of that is actually higher, around 82%. We've added 11 here for Arizona, making it 281. Now, many people are talking about, well, what about a national mandate? Well, I'll give you that. If Wisconsin and Nevada were to go, that's another 16, and that would be 297, nearly 300. And that's when you start talking about national mandates and probably carrying down ballot candidates with you. But for right now, what do we see? 270, 82%, 281 with Arizona, 80%, virtually unchanged from last week, but we're watching carefully to see if there's going to be any bounce that have come out of the VP debate that was a week ago. Those polls are being taken and analyzed right at this hour. Many of you have asked, where do we get our news? We get our news from Vtnews.ai. It's a news site that was built and launched by Valuetainment and a host of engineers that we brought together to build it. It provides you a look into the spin for each story, seeing what news stories covered it and which way they went. Find out the coverage details, and there's a powerful AI engine Ask AI about the story and receive a compilation of incredible assessment from our very own AI engine to give you even deeper insights. Set up your own filters for the preferences you want, certain political things, the state in which you live in, or certain topics. You can set those filters up. Go to Vtnews.ai, register, and take a look at the subscription plans that would give you access to the powerful AI engine. Vtnews.ai, that's where we get our news that we bring to you, and it's where you should get your news as well.
Join us next week as we take a look at any post-debate bounce that occurred following the vice presidential debate. And of course, we will also be diving into these crucial battleground states, many of the states we just covered: Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Nevada. We're going to be following these numbers very closely, so stay tuned for next week as we bring you our analysis and, of course, an updated electoral map prediction. My name is Amy Dangerfield.
And I'm Tom Ellsworth, the Biz Doc, and we'll let the candidates talk, their handlers spin, but we will cover the numbers and bring them to you because words talk, but numbers scream. See you next week.